Okay, right now we're going to look at rational expressions. First of all, let's talk about what rational numbers are. Well, rational numbers are any numbers that can be represented as a fraction. Okay, so the simplest rational expressions are just rational numbers. So for example, rational numbers are fractions, basically. Okay? Every whole number can be represented as a fraction by just putting it over 1. So 1/7 is a rational number, 3/5 is a rational number, negative 2/11 is a rational number, and so on. What's not a rational number are things like pi or square root 2 or something like that. So these are called rational numbers. Now rational expressions, okay, when we're talking about algebra, expressions are things that have variables in them, so, or unknowns, so variables. So for example, 1/x is a rational expression. 3/x is a rational expression. X plus 4 over x minus 1 is a rational expression. And then where we're more going to is something like 3x squared minus 2x plus 7 over x minus 4 is a rational expression. So these are all rational expressions. Basically, polynomials divided by polynomials are what we're looking at for our rational expressions. There are different ones, but these are the ones that we're going to be looking at. So polynomials over polynomials. Now, what can we do with these rational expressions? Well, we're going to look at the standard operations in mathematics. So we're going to add, subtract, multiply, and divide these rational expressions. Now, before we can do that, we've got to remember how we can add, subtract, multiply, and divide numerical fractions or numerical rational expressions. Okay, so how do we multiply? Well, let's do adding. How do we add rational numbers? So adding, well, let's take a look at that. So 1/7 plus 3/7. Well, we've got a common denominator, so if we got two things divided up into 7 pieces and you've got 1 of them here and 3 of them there, well then you'd have 4 in total, so 4/7. So that's when the denominator is the same. If it's not the same, well then you have to look for something that is the same. So if you had 1/7 plus let's say 3/14, well then you have to have the lowest common denominator between the two. Well, this, whatever is broken up into 14 pieces, this is broken up into 7. Well, let's break these ones up into 2 more pieces for each one, and then you'd have 14. So what we do there is we multiply the top and the bottom by 2. So 2 times the top, 2 times the bottom, and we'd have 2/14, an equivalent fraction to 1/7, plus 3/14, and now we'd have 5/14. You do the same thing with subtracting. If it's minus in there, you'd subtract. Okay. So that's if one of the numbers is a factor of the other number. Now, if not, so say like have you something like 2/3 plus 3/5. Well, now you're going to have to break this up into 5 pieces each and this up into 3 pieces. So you multiply the common denominator, or the denominators together, and you'll end up with 3 times 5 is 15. And then over here is going to be 15. And I had to multiply this by 5 to get 15, so I have to multiply that by 5, and I get 10. Okay, 3 times 5 here is 15, so 3 times 3, 9. Add those together, you've got 19/15. Okay, and now what if you had something where you could do better than just multiplying these together? Okay, so let's think of something here. How about Okay, so 5 over, let's say, 12 plus 7 over 18. Well, in this case here, we could multiply the 12 times 18 and get a common denominator. It's going to be mighty big. But we notice that 12 and 18 have a common factor that's bigger than 1. In this one with 3 and 5, the greatest common factor of those was 1. Okay, so the largest number that divided into both is 1. But in these two, it's 6. So we're going to break this up to 5 over, I'm going to factor this to 2 times 6. And this one I'm going to factor to, so it's 7 over 3 times 6. And then the common denominator for this, so that this will contain both a 2 times 6 for the new denominator. So it has to contain a 2 times 6. Okay. And the other one is going to have to contain a 3 times 6. Well, to make them the lowest common denominator, if I just multiply this by 3, okay, so 3 times that, and then 2 times that, then for both denominators I have 3 times 2 times 6, 3 times 2 times 6, doesn't matter what order. That is going to be the new common denominator, and it's going to be the lowest common denominator. So the way you figure out the lowest common denominator is you factor it out, whatever is factor the two numbers, whatever the common factor is, basically just cover it up in 1 and multiply the rest of the numbers. That is your lowest common denominator between the two fractions. So again, factor both of them so that you got the common factor, the greatest common factor of both, cover up one of them, and that multiplied out is your new common denominator. So 3 times 2 times 6. Now, what did I have to do to this to get this common denominator? Is I multiplied it by 3. So I'm going to do 3 times 5 on the top. What did I have to do to this to get this new common denominator? Well, I multiplied it by 2. So I'm going to go 2 times 7 on the top. And so now we've got 15, and, well, the common denominator for this now is going to be 36. Okay, so 3 times 2 times 6, well, 2 times 6 is 12, and 3 12s is 36. Plus 2 times 7 is 14 over 36. And then we can add those, and we get 29 over 36. Okay, that's by doing it for the lowest common denominator. So that's adding. Now, what about multiplying? Well, subtracting is the same. You just put a minus between them, and you actually subtract the numerators. Okay, so multiplying, well, multiplying is a simple rule. So you've got, say if you've got 2 over 7 times 3, well, we can multiply a fraction times a whole number. That's the same as 2 over 7 times 3 over 1. And when you multiply, you do the top times the top, bottom times the bottom. So you've got 6 over 7. 2 over 7 times 5 over 4, well, then that would be 2 times 5, which equals 10, over 7 times 4. Well, 7 times 4 is 28. Okay. So, and that reduces to, well, 2 goes into 10 5 times, and 2 goes into 28 14 times. So you can reduce it like that. Now the better way of doing this is over here. Look at these numbers on the top and the bottom. The 5 and the 7, well, they're not factors of each other, but the 2 and 4, the 2 is a factor of 4. So you could do this as 2 over 7 times 5 over 2 times 2. Okay? And then these 2's just cancel out, and you end up with 5 on the top, and 7 times 2 on the bottom, which is 14. So you can get right to the lowest fraction that way. Now multiplying fractions is almost like, dividing fractions is almost like multiplying. Okay, so to divide, well, instead of multiplying top, multiplying bottom, so the rule for this is just flip the second one and multiply. So if you have 2/7 times 3/5, well, you just multiply, right? But if it's divided, then what you do, so that's a division sign there, you go 2/7 times 5/3. You flip the second one and you multiply, and that would give you 10/21. Okay, so very simple for dividing, just flip the second and multiply. Now what if you had 2/7 divided by a whole number, like 3? Well, then you do 2/7 divided by 3/1 and do the same thing. So it's going to be 2/7 times 1/3, which equals 2/21. Okay, so that's operations with numbers, with fractions. Now we're going to do the similar things with rational expressions, because we're going to have to factor some rational expressions to do this, some quadratics.